Let's start off with something obvious. User experience, or UX, is hot right now. So here are a couple salary statistics. In 2019, the midpoint salary for a UX designer was projected to be 93,000 US dollars. And the midpoint salary for a UX researcher was 87,500. In the next 10 years, the projected job growth of the UX design profession is 22%. So what that means is now is a great time to be a UX professional. And in order to be one, you're going to have to master your UX job interview. And that's what we're here to talk about today. So before we get too deep into the talk, let me briefly just tell you about me. My name is Jennifer Blatz, but I go by Jen, and I'm a lead UX researcher and designer at Fidelity Investments. I have worked in a number of fields, including finance, cloud storage, security, and pet health. I'm also a co-founder of UX Research and Strategy, and that's the group that's bringing you this webinar today. I have been a speaker for several local meetups and international conferences like Convey UX, UX Research and Insight Summit, and the IA conference, just to name a few. Let's talk about the group who's bringing you this webinar today. UX Research and Strategy is a nonprofit 501c3 organization that was founded in spring of 2019. So we are about 1 year old. Woohoo! Happy birthday to us. The group was created based on community feedback, and we formed this group that is dedicated to teaching topics in UX research and strategy, hence the name. Our goal is to make these topics both approachable and actionable in our local community and our ever-growing international family. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the talk, UX research and strategy can be found on most of your favorite social media channels. Use the hashtag UX research or UXRS for UX research and strategy to tag us on your social media mentions today. Our group, even though we're still a little baby of 1 year old, we have over 15,200 connections on LinkedIn. And we would love to have more. If you are not connected to us, please connect to us on LinkedIn. You can also follow us on Eventbrite for our events that are coming up. We also have a presence on YouTube and just a brand new presence on Vimeo, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a little bit. So let's talk about some upcoming events. We have a couple of great events coming up. And to practice social distancing in light of the COVID virus these days, our May and June events will be online again. Our next event is a free webinar with Andy Vitale, and he's going to be talking about UX design and ethics on May 14th. So go on Eventbrite right now if you haven't had the chance to do so, and get your free ticket to that webinar. It's going to be pretty cool. And then our June 2nd event is also a free webinar with Amy Ross from NASA. And she's going to be talking about the UX of spacesuits. So that's something you're not going to want to miss either. Haven't quite got the tickets released for that, but just if you follow our Eventbrite channel, you'll have the opportunity to get your free ticket. So here's what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to give you an overview of UX jobs and UX job interviews. I'm going to talk about how to be prepared for the interview. I'm going to give you some interview tips. Then we're going to go take a deeper dive into the questions that you need to know the answers to when you go into your next UX job interview. I'm going to cover things like, why are they asked? I'm going to give you some tips on how to come up with your unique and personal answer. And finally, I'm going to give you an example of each. Then we're going to flip things around a little bit and talk about the questions that you should ask the hiring manager or the person who is interviewing you. And then finally, I will go over probably the most important part of the interview, and that is how to create your elevator pitch. So for a successful UX job interview, it pays to be prepared. One of the first things most interviewers will ask you is, tell me about yourself. Well, what they're looking for is your elevator pitch. And this is a quick summary all about you. We're going to revisit this topic a little bit later in this talk today. Next, you want to prove that you know your stuff. This usually relates to talking about your UX process or how you solved a business problem. If the interview is in person, make sure you have extra copies of your resume with you. And also, if it is in person, have your resume and your portfolio on your machine on a local, like on your machine position. Don't just rely on the internet to show somebody your portfolio or your resume. Make sure you have a local copy saved. And make sure you tie your skills, your experience, and your value back to the job description and what the company is looking for. You're going to hear me say that a lot today. Finally, this touches on an age-old question. Do you need a UX portfolio? And the simple answer is yes. And why? That's because they want to see the work that you have done. This can be as simple as one case study. Even if you're a UX researcher, you should have a portfolio piece to have something to speak to. Speaking of which, we had a previous webinar that was how to create a user experience research portfolio. And we just released the video of that for purchase, and that's on Vimeo. Lori's going to put the link in the chat if you're interested of purchasing the video, which is about how to create a user experience research portfolio. There's a lot of resources out there for designers, but this one is catered to researchers and strategists. So it's a great webinar. Lori, wow, I was really impressed how she really walks you through how to create the best case study portfolio if you're a UX researcher and not some, fancy designer. Sometimes it's difficult, but even if you don't have those fabulous design skills, please make sure you check out this webinar because she shows you exactly how to do it, and it's great. So back to, yes, you need a portfolio, and now you don't have an excuse of not knowing how to do one because Lori's video is going to clearly walk you right through how to make that portfolio. And the good thing about having this portfolio in hand is it gives you something to speak to. It's kind of like a crutch, but in a good way, because now you can use this portfolio to facilitate a conversation. So having some visual reference to walk through your UX process is a great reason why you should have a portfolio. So again, if you're interested in Lori's webinar, she's put the link in the chat and you can check out how to build a UX researcher portfolio there. So hopefully some of you might be familiar with the STAR, S-T-A-R, method of storytelling. This is a simple framework to help you frame your story in an organized way. Yes, I get it. You want to tell your story, but you want to be brief and concise. And the STAR method can help you package your story. STAR stands for situation, task, action, and result. And my recommendation is when you work through your UX interview answers, use the STAR format framework to package your story. So when you tell your story, just include the important details and prepare these stories in advance. You're going to hear me say prepare a lot in this webinar today, so kind of get used to that. And then finally, look at the skills required for the job. Think of how your STAR story pieces can tie your skills to the skills the hiring company needs. So let's look a little bit deeper at the STAR framework for telling a story. The situation is where you tee up the basics. This is what the story's all about, what problem you were trying to solve, and what type of project it was. Basically, you give the necessary context about what you were working on. The task is simply what you were working on. This is where you talk about what you did and how you were involved. This is a chance to briefly illustrate your skills and strengths as a tie to the job you're interviewing for. I do have a word of caution when you're explaining your situation and your task. Be sure to explain the situation in very simple layman's terms. Do not use technical jargon or abbreviations that your interviewer might not understand. Remember that your audience has zero context, so you need to simplify the story more than you might think you have to. The actions, quite simply, are the steps or the actions you took to solve the problem. Focus on how you contributed to the project rather than the rest of the team's input. Now, you need to be honest. Don't take credit for the whole thing if you didn't do it all, but be honest about the contributions that you had to this project. And then you wrap up the story with a simple result, which is what happened after it launched. What measurements and KPIs were met? If it didn't launch, tell the interviewer why. Talk about what you learned and how you professionally grew from this project. So now let's look at how this works when we come up with a story that we want to align it to the job opening. So tie your star story and your skills back to the job role. So what you're seeing here on the screen is a recent job description I saw for a senior UX designer. Now take a look at some of the skills that are listed here and think about how you would tell your UX story to match the skills that the job requires. Do what I did here. Either highlight or emphasize the key skills the job is asking for. And then think about your professional experiences. And literally write out your star scenario to address a few of these. Writing them out forces you to come up with a better, more cohesive story around. Plus, it gives you a chance to refine and perfect it. If you try to come up with a star scenario on the fly, it may not be as polished as you would hope. So just kind of remember, this interview is your chance to make an outstanding impression. So don't mess it up. Come in prepared and practiced. So now let's walk through an example of where I used a STAR framework. The question is, what is a recent project you were challenged by? And tell us how I approached the problem, or how you approached the problem. So here's my example to that question. I was working at a veterinary company who owned several animal hospitals across the United States and Canada. My role was a UX researcher and designer, and I worked on the in-house software used by doctors and technicians in these animal hospitals. The software did things like book appointments and held the pet's medical records. I found out at stand-up one day that a doctor mobile app was going to start development in just a couple of days. What doctor mobile app? This was the first time I'd ever heard of this project. The app was for doctors to review a pet's information before walking into the room to be better prepared. So I questioned how they knew what features should be in this app. Well, it turns out the product owner had a lengthy list of features that he thought should be included in that app. My gut told me that this was way more than the doctor wanted. I begged for just a couple of hours to talk to a handful of doctors to get a better understanding of the information that was most valuable to a doctor in a mobile app. Well, it turns out that every doctor I talked to only wanted to know two things. One, they wanted to know what kind of animal it was. And two, they wanted to know what kind of situation the doctor is stepping into when they walk into that examination room. They wanted to know, is this a routine visit, like for vaccines? Or is the doctor stepping into a medical trauma situation, like the pet has been run over by a car? This is simply all the information they needed from the app. By talking to just a handful of doctors and doing that user research, I was able to eliminate 75% of the features that they were going to stuff into that app. By reducing these features, we were going to create a better user experience for the doctors. We simplified the app significantly. We reduced the development time a ton. Therefore, we got the product in the user's hand weeks sooner. It cost several $1,000s less to develop than it had been originally planned. That was a big win. So here's some of the things I highlighted during my story using the STAR framework. For this situation, I covered the company I worked at, a high-level summary of the project, and my role on the project. For the task, I talked about what I did. I was user researcher and using that to validate assumptions. Then I covered what actions I took. I talked to doctors to get an understanding of what their needs were. After my research, I reported the findings to my team so that we could move forward with the designs. And then I wrapped up with the result. I talked about how my research could produce a better user experience. I talked about how the research completely changed the scope of the app and how we were faster to market and developed it on a smaller budget. Okay, so now that we understand how to structure our story, let's switch gears a bit and talk about some general tips for a great UX job interview. In the interview, make sure that your personality shines through. They're not hiring a robot, so don't be one. Smile. Ugh, I know. I really hate when people tell me to smile. I get it. But it's really important to be positive in an interview. You want to show that you're excited to be there. Answer the interview questions with a smile. It really does make a difference. Also, there's a fine line between coming off as confident and arrogant. They're looking for a good fit for their team. And believe me, no one is looking for an egomaniac. So show them that you're likable and that you're a good fit for the company. Next, you want to show them your value. You want to play up your skills, your experience, and how you bring all of that wealth to the company. Show them that you are gold and they can't live without you. So how do you do this? You tie your skills and your experience back to the job description. Show them quite simply that you have exactly what they are looking for. Remember to use the STAR framework when you tell your story. And don't forget to show them that you are a good investment. You will grow with them, invest in them, and you hope that they will do the same. Okay, so we have a good foundation on how to prepare going into an interview. Now let's get to the meat of the whole thing, the actual interview questions. So the first question that often comes up in a UX job interview is, tell me about yourself. I'm sure some of you who have been through an interview have heard this very question. This is basically a quick summary about you, professionally. It's also called the elevator pitch because you're supposed to tell your story fast enough to complete it in an elevator ride. That's why it needs to be quick and to the point. So why are they asking you to answer this? Tell me about yourself. Well, they want to get to know you really quickly. That's why it should only be 1 to 2 minutes. Also, keep in mind, they might be testing you to see how concise you can be in an answer. So have your elevator pitch short and tight. We're going to talk a bit more about this, how to craft an awesome elevator pitch a bit later, toward the end of today's talk. So let's move on to the other questions for now. What is your UX process? Yeah, this is a good one. Basically, they want to see what you know about UX. They ask this to see if you approach how you approach a project, how you work through it, and how you complete it. Do you just ask about visual design? Or do you discuss research, talking to users, and understand the problem? Do you sketch out your design ideas? Or do you jump right into Sketch or Figma and then crank out those high resolution mock-ups? What research methods do you use? And do you understand the methods to use to surface the right kinds of data and insights? Do you have a basic understanding of UX strategy? Or are you going to ramble on and on about UX and not make sense? Be careful. Rambling is easier than you might think. So why do they ask this? Again, to see what you consider your UX process to be. There are also a few other things to consider as you talk through this. Talk about things like if there was something you did not get to do, or if there's something you would do differently, that is what that is and why. Now, this might be you talking through a case study, and this is why you would talk about things that, maybe you didn't get to do in this case study. Talk about how others are involved in the project. And finally, you want to find out how your process aligns with the company's process. So you can ask them. So this is what you do. You let them ask you, what is your UX process? And then you answer it. And then you go back to them and say, so how does this compare to your UX process? Ask the hiring manager or the person interviewing them. You ask, how does this compare to your process? And see how that compares. Remember, you're trying to make sure that this company is a good fit for you too. So some tips on how to answer this question. What is your process? You can briefly walk through a project and talk about your strategy and the steps you took to design it. It helps if this is a case study that you have the visuals to help tell your story. This is why I said it's good to have a case study as that visual crutch to aid you in that conversation. Talk through how you approach the project. Show how you fall in love with the problem before jumping into solutions. Show that you talk to users to understand their goals, their needs, and their pain points. You balance user needs with business goals. What research methods you used and why you chose those methods. If you are a designer, talk about the fidelity of the designs you went through and the deliverables you created. How did the design change based on research, like usability tests? What constraints and business needs did you have to work around? Finally, talk about what happened with the project. What were the outcomes and the results? And how did that make you feel? Or how did it contribute to making you a better UX professional? So here's my example of how I would answer this. When I get assigned to a new project, it's important for me to understand and define the problem. This understanding can come from a number of sources, including stakeholder and user interviews. Then I form a hypothesis from which I formulate a research approach to confirm or destroy that hypothesis by researching the problem. After conducting research with real users, I share those research findings with the team and determine if and what other research is needed. So much of that depends on the project and what needs to be understood. When I have some ideas of how I might move forward with the design, I create low-risk sketches to communicate the problem and the possible solutions with my users, stakeholders, and the developers. After getting this feedback, I will likely need to iterate my designs based on that feedback. As I test the designs, I can move forward to a higher fidelity mock-up based on the level of feedback I am seeking. I will continue to test, iterate, and design based on that customer feedback loop. And when the product is finally released, we will measure the success by predetermined KPIs and measurements, as well as user retention and satisfaction. As we know, very rarely is a product released without some need for improvement. So we'll revisit the backlog and continue to make our product better and keep our users not just satisfied, but delighted. So as you can see, this is a high-level summary of my process. And I think it's deep enough to illustrate that I understand the major components of a UX process. Okay, let's move on to the next question. What trends or topics are you finding exciting in UX right now? Now, I get it. This may seem like a silly question to some people. Who cares if you're reading the latest Medium articles? Maybe you're a UX researcher and you don't really follow all the top UX designers on Instagram or Dribbble. Well, whether or not you think this is a relevant question, it might still get asked, so be prepared. They ask you this to see if you keep up on what's going on in the industry. They want someone who has their finger on the pulse of what's happening in UX and technology, not just someone who's sitting there reading War and Peace. They also want to see that you have a passion about your craft. You are a lifelong learner. And you're eager to stay relevant by improving your skill set and therefore yourself. So some tips on this. The interviewer is not looking for a long list here, folks. Keep it simple. Just pick one or two topics and briefly summarize why they're interesting to you. The key here is to relate the topic back to the skills and the job description of the company. Maybe talk about something related to the industry they're in, the technology that they use, or perhaps maybe an executive that you read about at that company. So my example would be, let's say I'm responding to a job posting that mentioned working in co-located teams. With people self-quarantined recently due to the COVID-19 virus, I'm really fascinated with the opportunities in collaborating digitally. So much of my current job role as a UX designer and researcher is working with teammates in other locations. It's just not feasible for us to be working together in person all of the time. Plus, I think as we enter a more global workforce, we need to explore opportunities to work together across locations and time zones. I'd love to think about this from many angles. The technology, improving a person's work, opportunity for diversity and more inclusion, and addressing the user's pain points, and really getting to the root of their problem. I really like the idea of really offering capabilities to make our global communication and collaboration more manageable and approachable. So question number 4, how do you show the impact and value of conducting user research? This question is similar to the how do you influence others question. It's kind of the same idea. How do you sell something to skeptics? But for this question, we're going to focus on the research aspects because I hear this a lot that people are like, ugh, do we really have to do research? Yes, the answer is yes. So why is this asked? This question, like I said, even though research focus could be applied to anyone. Even designers conduct user research from time to time. They're looking for a person with a low ego, who has a pleasant attitude and doesn't try to show off as the smartest person in the room. And you portray that by showing that you have low ego and that you can convince others by not being an egomaniac. The hiring manager wants someone who can make recommendations with confidence. I do have a warning for you about this question, showing the value of user research. This question could be a red flag. Though this seems like a really innocent question, this could show that the company has a culture or communication problem and they expect you to solve it. They may have some high ego stakeholders or difficult staff members that are making their design lives difficult. Also, you might need to be worried that research and user-centered design might not be valued at this company. I would recommend that you turn the tables and try to get more info about this problem at the company. Ask them if it is a problem and what are they doing to solve it? You know, this might not be a battle zone that you want to step into. So some tips on how to talk about showing the value of user research. Basically, you can give an example of how it has worked for you in the past. Use the STAR framework to package and tell your story. Some of the things that you could speak to answer this question are expect the challenges and how you express the challenges and how you overcame them. Let's say you use some site analytics that shows the number of visits to a portion of the site. Speak to that. Show how you can empathize, assess the situation, analyze what needs to be done, and communicate effectively. So remember that example I gave a little bit earlier when I talked about the STAR method, when the veterinary company was going to create a doctor's mobile app and that had way more features than the doctor wanted? Well, this is a perfect example where I showed the value of user research and how I convinced my skeptics. I also showed how my research had a quick turnaround and it didn't slow the developers down, and that it reduced the scope of the app. The result was a leaner app that could be released more quickly and at a lower cost. Now, if that doesn't sell the value of user research, I don't know what will. Next question, tell me about a time you made a mistake. Ugh, I know, no one wants to answer this one. This is a tough one. They're asking you this to basically see if you can admit your mistakes. If you can't recall a time that you made a mistake, that is not good. It's going to be a big red flag to the person interviewing you. No one is perfect. And if you don't claim any mistakes, this could signal a problem. They are looking for a UX pro who has a low ego. And the hiring manager is also trying to assess your self-awareness. The most important thing you want to show from this answer is, sure, you have made mistakes, but you have learned from them to be a better person and a better professional. You have learned something from the experience, and it shaped how you approach another problem later on. Again, use the STAR framework to tell your story. Talk about a mistake that is small, not something critically harmful for the project or the team, and just don't show that you're a complete failure. Show that you learned a lesson from your mistake. Okay, so here's my example. You guys ready? I remember this time when we did not do proper research and it came back to bite us in the behind. We had a product and assumed that the features it had could be used for a different user group. We just assumed that the other user group would find value in our product. We were on a pretty tight deadline and we were on a pretty tight deadline and the rest of the team wanted to move forward without proper foundational research. I wanted to understand the user's group's needs and tasks, but I wanted to be a good partner to my team, so I did not push back on their insistence to move forward without this research. Well, it turned out that the other user group did not find the value in the features and that the product had to offer. Oops. Now we're having to make heavy modifications, which are expensive and time-consuming. If given another chance, I would push back and suggest we do that proper foundational research and make sure we are researching to understand the user's tasks and needs before moving forward. It's this instance, we do not research. It's when we don't do research is when these wrong assumptions can prove very costly. Next question. How do you deal with conflicts or disagreements? As you can see, many of the questions I talked about today, a lot of them are trying to assess your ego. Even if the job description uses labels like rock star or ninja, they really don't want someone who has the ego of a rock star. They're looking for people who have the ability to adjust and be flexible. Show that you're willing to work with others and can adjust as needed for the better of the product and the user. Show that you can communicate openly and safely, even if you don't agree. And by safely, I mean that you are not going to get hostile and defensive. Show that you have empathy and understanding not only for your users, but for your teammates and your stakeholders too. Show how you overcame the challenge. You are a bigger person and you learn to be better next time. And finally, show them that it is okay to respectfully disagree. So here are some tips on ways to discuss how to deal with conflicts. You need to keep it professional and civil. This is not the time to be defensive. Keep your cool and don't come off as a jerk. And don't blame others. You need to show humility and grace here and show your responsibility and your part in the conflict. Okay, so here is my example. I had a challenging time communicating with the UI designer on my team. He was kind of rigid and our conversations were strained. I found out this because he did not understand why I was not creating mock-ups like he did. I was hired to perform different duties, like more research and less UI design. I was not aware of the differences. So we had a chat with our product manager, and the UI designer got a better understanding of my role. And I got a better understanding of his role. And together, we learned about the expected deliverables and efforts between the both of us. After that conversation, we worked together better because the research I was doing was helping to inform his UI design. So a question that often comes up in an interview is, what are your strengths? Or what are your superpowers? And then the opposite of that, what are your weaknesses? This question is still looking for low ego and for you to kind of admit that you're not perfect. If you say you have no weaknesses, that's going to be a red flag to the person interviewing you. Don't do it. But on the positive part of this question, this is your chance to shine. Briefly talk up your strengths and remember to tie your strengths back to the job description. Sure, you might be an awesome basket weaver, but is that going to get you this UX job? I don't think so. Finally, another reason why our hiring manager might be asking about your superpowers is to assess how you might fit in with the rest of the team and to see if your superpowers would complement the other members of your team. So some tips on this superpowers and weaknesses question. Just pick one strength and one weakness and keep it brief. Have this prepared in advance so it doesn't catch you off guard. This can be a tough question if you're not ready for it, especially the weakness part. Do not blame others for your weakness. This is all on you. Talk about how you overcome your weaknesses. And, it could be things like with training or a mentor. Okay, I have one word of caution about weakness though. Don't make it related directly to the job in a bad way. In other words, if the job description talks about performing usability tests, do not say that you hate to conduct usability tests and that you think they're stupid. No. But don't lie. But you don't want to shoot yourself in the foot by expressing that you're awful at something that's really crucial for you to get the job. Okay, so here's my example of a weakness. I used to be impatient at times. I hope to get answers and results on my timeline. Sometimes that did not coincide with the other person's availability. At times, if they did not get back to me quickly, my tendency was to stop waiting for them and start doing it myself. This certainly is not the best approach. To correct my own weakness, I have started to be more patient and give people the opportunity to get back to me within hours, not minutes. If it's urgent, I'll let that person know my expectations so we are not miscommunicating. I have learned that clear communication about expectations has helped me manage my expectations. It has prevented me from putting unfair timelines on that other person. Question number 8, why do you want to work here? Probably not because this doggo is leading the meetings here, but I don't know, that would be kind of cool. So you say you want to work for this company because the salary is $150,000, right? No, 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 no. This is not the answer you want to give them. It might be true, but no, that's not what you say. The hiring manager is trying to see if you have researched the company. If you're a good researcher or designer, you've taken the time to at least know what the company does and the products or services that they provide. This is your opportunity to talk about the company's products and how your experience relates to what the company needs and the industry at large. You need to show your passion and enthusiasm about the position and the company. You want to work here because you're excited about what they do, and you must be a part of that excitement. So here are some tips on how to talk about why you want to work here. Make sure you actually do the research on the company so that you can give informed answers. I would suggest that you research your interviewers on social media and LinkedIn to see if you have anything in common, or at least to know about them. And if you do have something in common, you might have the opportunity to bring up that in a conversation, if it's relevant. Let's say maybe you both went to the same university. You could bring that up at an appropriate time if it works in. Humans naturally bond to others who have something in common with them. And as I have said a few times, tie what the company needs to the skills that you have. One little note, don't just keep restating the same skills in all these questions every time. Use these opportunities to showcase more of your skills each time. So for the example, it's tough for me to give an example for this one. It really depends on what the company does and what you want to do for them and the value that you can bring to the team. To come up with your own reason, know the job expectations, know the company, and tell them honest reasons why you want to work there. Okay, question number 9. What value do you bring to the company? And this is also known as the why should we hire you question. Again, this is your chance to shine. Keep it brief, but bring up any significant traits and skills that you can link back to the company and back to the job description. Watch out though. This question could be another way the hiring manager or the person interviewing you is trying to see what research you have done about the company. So know your stuff and come prepared. This is your chance to show your excitement and your passion about UX. And remember, you want to show that you have low ego, so be humble, but be proud of your accomplishments. One big tip I want to share is to start with is that this is not the time to let imposter syndrome creep in. Show the hiring manager that she wants you and she can't live without you, but keep it UX focused. Sure, it's easy to talk about how much you're looking forward to playing on the company's ping pong table, but you need to keep it professional. And along the same lines, make sure you relate it back to the company and the products. So here's a pro tip for you. You are interviewing the company too. So you want to make sure that you get to know them as well. So this is what I would do. You let them ask the question first. What value do you bring to the company? They ask you that, okay? Then you answer the question for them. No problem. Now you turn the tables and you ask the interviewer, what values and traits are you looking for in the person you want to bring on board. Then just wait, let them answer. Listen to what they say. And then you tell them how you will meet those traits. Again, to answer this question would need to be specific to the role in the company. Say one of the items in the job description or that has come up in the conversation is that they're looking for someone who has worked in a cross-functional team. Then your answer could cover how you have worked in teams that consisted of developers, business analysts, and product partners. You could talk about how those interactions were positive, and then talk about how you love the different perspectives that each person brings to solving the customer's problems. So many times the last question a hiring manager or whoever is interviewing you in a UX job is, what questions do you have about our company or products? Or they may ask, what questions do you have for me? This is asked because they want to see if you research the company. That could be one motivation why they ask that. And if you haven't, they might think that you are not the curious UX researcher and designer that you're looking for. So again, make sure you know a little bit about the company before you walk into this interview. And make sure you have some questions ready for them. This might also be the first chance that you've had the opportunity to ask them questions. So make these questions good and insightful. Show them that you've done your homework and you're ready to have a real conversation. Never, never, never say you don't have any questions. Always have something ready so that you're not blindsided. You don't want to remember these important questions later after the interview. I think it's completely okay to have some questions written down and ready to go. I even have a notepad ready to jot down those answers. Believe me, there's so much going on in the interview, it's really tough to remember what they said. So write a few notes down to help you remember what was talked about later. Ask about their products and services to show that you've done your research. And then talk about how your experience relates back to the company's needs and the industry. So again, these questions would have to be very specific to the company, their product, or the people on the team. Hopefully you'll get a chance to ask more. This could be the time that you have the chance to ask about, things like the team's culture, then their work style. This could also be a good opportunity to ask about things like how the team is structured, how they work on projects, and what their UX process is. This is the time for you to find out if you really want to work here. So ask the questions that are important for you to know about the company before you step in. Whew. Okay, I know we covered a lot. So let's switch gears and talk about some of the things that you should be asking a hiring manager during the interview. Granted, these are not exclusive to the hiring manager. They could be asked to anyone of the team who's interviewing you. Remember, you're trying to find out if this company is a good fit for you too. So make sure you have some time to ask your questions. How does your company encourage your employees to grow or develop or learn? Or how is my professional growth built into the company's culture? When you ask this question, some of the things that you are looking for are, do they care about your professional growth? Will they send you to conferences? Will they let you take classes, spend any money for you to learn? Now, don't ask directly if they spend money on their employees. That's not what I'm suggesting. But try to find out if they value continued education. Maybe ask if their designers have attended a conference in the past year and see how they answer this. If they act surprised at the thought of sending people to a conference, this may tell you that they don't invest in their employees' education. What are some of the challenges the team is facing? Or what are some of the reasons for those challenges? So what you're looking for here is drama. Find out if there are bad employees or if this is a negative work environment. You want to know if they have unreasonable expectations or timelines or duties. Sometimes companies don't really know what they're looking for in a UX pro. In other words, they have UX confusion. They start describing duties that don't fall under the UX umbrella. You want to pay attention to this. If they start mentioning programming languages that you are not familiar with, or that you're going to be creating logos and PowerPoints for the marketing department, these might be signs that they do not understand what a UX pro does. And this is a red flag. So you should know this kind of information before starting there. If they say there are no challenges, they might not be completely truthful with you. So this could be a red flag. Every workplace has problems and issues. The next question is basically asking, why do people leave the department? So can you please tell me about the turnover rate on your team? What are some of the reasons for these shifts? What you're looking for here is the position being filled by, is it a new position or if it's somebody who's left? That's okay to know. But you want to know, are people fleeing the company or do employees stay here a while? Is it a role that they have to fill over and over? But you don't want to ask them that directly. You just want to kind of get a feel with their answer, what they say to this. I'm saying to watch the interviewer's reaction, and that can be quite telling. So you're kind of thinking about, this is what you're trying to surface from this question. Are there problems with the boss or the department? That could be one reason why they keep having to fill this role, if it's a repeat fill. Do they have a lot of people leave? Then this is a red flag, and you should be thinking about this. This might not be a good fit for you. Why do you stay with the company? You're likely to get a pretty fluffy answer to this question about why the company is so great or why they love what they do, blah, blah, blah. And that's okay. That's actually the answer you're expecting to hear. But keep an eye out for an adverse reaction. This might indicate some sort of drama. You're basically trying to find out if the company culture is good or bad. What do they like about the company? What are the reasons they mention? Do these reasons seem genuine? Are these the reasons that matter to you? You want to make sure that the interviewer is talking about the things you are looking for in a company. What traits are you looking for in the person you're hiring for this position? Well, this is your chance to see if they understand what a UX person should be doing, and if there are any differences from the original job description and today. And it's okay if the old job description is a little bit different. Things happen and things change slightly, but you want to look out for huge changes and differences that you may not want to sign up for. You'd be surprised what people think UX researchers and designers should be doing versus what they actually do. Almost everyone has a different definition of what a UX designer does and delivers. Make sure you have a good understanding of what the employer's definition of a UX role is. Along the same lines, you want to see if they have unreasonable expectations. If they expect you to give up your life, work 18 hours a day, play on their foosball table instead of going home and having a life, this could be a big problem. Also, you want to find out if they expect you to do the role of 2 to 3 people. This is another death trap that you might want to avoid. The most important thing here is to see if what you're looking for aligns with what they do and if it matches your skill set. Okay, I have one more kind of tricky bonus question for you to ask in an interview of the person who is interviewing you. What is something about this department, the company culture, or the job environment you might not tell an interviewing candidate like myself, but you would share with a close friend? Now, I know that this sounds like a tough question to ask, and it's not for everyone, believe me. In order to pull this off, you have to have established some good rapport with the interviewer. But I like this question for a number of reasons. First, it shows that you are curious and you're willing to ask tough questions and probe deeper when you need to. Asking this question takes guts, and you have to learn if this company is one who appreciates people who has guts, or if they're just looking for yes people who take everything at face value. You want to look at their reaction when they ask this question. Are they open to candid question and pushback, or are they offended because you ask such a forward question? Do you want to work at a place that doesn't encourage you as a UX pro? I doubt it. I mean, that they don't encourage you to question the status quo. I'm guessing that you don't. So it's good to kind of ask this. Okay. So now the moment we've all been waiting for. I know we are at time, but I'm going to go a little bit over. I understand if people need to leave to make it to their next meeting, you can catch this part in the interview. In the video. And if you do have to leave, thank you for attending, but I'm going to run a little bit long today. Apologies. So way back at the beginning of this talk today, I talked about the tell us about yourself or the elevator pitch question. Let's take a deeper dive into that now. I've come up with a framework to help you refine your quick story so that you can create a draft, determine the best points you want to talk about, and string it together into one story or elevator pitch. After you write it out, you can practice it and have it ready to go in any circumstance. It's great to master your elevator pitch for any reason, not just for a job interview. You should have an elevator pitch ready for when you're introducing yourself in a meeting or for any other social situation you might be thrown into. Okay, so before we get too much into the framework, I just want to give you a few tips on how to make your elevator pitch quick, strong, and real. It's got to be short. We're not looking for your life story here, folks. 1 to 2 minutes. Tell it slowly, be concise, and don't ramble. This is why you must organize it and practice it beforehand. Practice makes perfect. This should go without saying, but make sure it's your story and it's truthful and authentic. Don't use somebody else's story as your elevator pitch. And when you tell your story, make sure you make eye contact, smile, breathe. This is all about you. You got this. Okay, so let's look first at the top of the framework. You want to identify the job role and the company that you're interviewing with and fill that in at the top. You are writing this elevator pitch to cater to the job description and to the company. Make sure you refer back to the job description when you're filling out the framework. This is very important. After you have identified the job role and the company, it's time to dive into the major parts of the framework. And there are 3 main portions of the framework: the past, or where you came from, the present, or where you are now, and the future, or where you are going. So let's start with the past. Think about where you came from. How did you first get into UX and why? Did you have an aha moment that really got you excited about UX? Talk about that path that got you here. Why does your journey into UX make you such a good fit for the job? Again, you always want to show your value to the company by relating your story back to the job description. The second phase you want to talk about is where are you now? This is where you kind of talk about where you are in your UX career. What makes you unique? What experience makes you the best fit for the job? What is your outlook of UX? You can also talk about, very briefly, you can talk about what you're working on these days. What are you excited about? Again, these are some of the unique points that I'll show that you should be talking about that shows that you are a good fit for the job. And then finally, you want to wrap up with where you want to go next in your UX career. What are you looking for in your next job? What makes you the best person for this job? Talk about your soft skills, experience, and traits that make you the most valuable candidate for the business and therefore this role. What excites you about the role, and why do you think you would be a good fit? Express your passion about UX and tie it back to the company and the role. So here's how to fill in the answers to the framework. First, you're going to brainstorm all the different aspects of your past, present, and future and how they relate to the UX. I would come up with more than one topic and put them into the framework. Fill in each column with multiple answers, and each one will be a distinct point, but something that you can string together. And then see which answers flow together. And to quickly and concisely tell your story. Remember, this has got to be a quick pitch. So here's my story. Or let's just really quickly get into, sorry, I got distracted. And so you wanted to have 1 to 2 minute summary and pick and choose the best pieces and stitch them together into one cohesive story. Make sure that you practice with yourself and another person. That other person can help you refine your story. So I kind of highlighted the things here to show you the pieces that I use to pull my story. And now I'm going to tell you what my elevator pitch is by using these pieces that I pulled from the my brainstorming session. So here's my example. Using the pieces from the past, present, and future columns. I come from a journalism background, which fed into my natural curiosity, my roots in visual design, and my interest in users. Even when I worked at a newspaper, I would think, people don't have time to read all of this. So I would put in design elements like pulled quotes to help readers get info quickly. It is this passion for assisting the user that propelled me into UX. I remember when I first discovered UX, and I learned how when a company focuses on understanding a user's goals, pain points, and motivations, this is how great products really could be built. And that blew my mind. I was hooked. Fast forward to now, where I'm a UX researcher and designer. I have been a UX team of one and I've been a part of a larger team. I added research to my tool belt when I needed to learn more about our users and how they used our products. Currently, I use a number of generative and evaluative research methods. You name it, I probably do it. Then I use that research to inform my UX designs. My passion lies in enterprise software, and this is why your position as a UX director appeals to me. We know that enterprise software is the low-hanging fruit that we can fix to make people work better. This is why I love working on it. As for my leadership skills, I co-founded a successful UX meetup group called UX Research and Strategy, and in less than a year, the group has accumulated over 15,200 connections on LinkedIn alone. It became a 501c3 nonprofit and has pulled in some major names from the UX world to speak at our meetings. Creating this group from scratch, based on a community need, proves that I'm a self-starter, a leader, and eager to provide the right solution to a real problem. I know that these are just some of the skills you are looking for in your director role. So, in that tell me about yourself story I just shared, I did a few things I want to point out. I pulled pieces from what I brainstormed in each column, the past, present, and future, and weaved them all together into one cohesive story. Second, I kept it brief. It's not my exhaustive life story, but it's a quick summary about my UX career. I referred back to the job role, addressing the skills they're looking for and illustrating my leadership skills. I tied it back to the company need by sharing my passion for working on enterprise software. And then finally, I practiced the heck out of it so that it was my fabulous journey. Okay, so now's your last chance to put your questions in the chat because I'm going to wrap up today's talk. And thank you for those who hung on a bit past the hour. We'll be able to take a few questions. So let's wrap up today's session by revisiting some of the major points I talked about today. First, have 1 to 2 strong case studies that you can walk them through. You will use these to explain your process and articulate your story. Tie as much as you can your elevator pitch, your star examples, your strengths back to the job descriptions and the traits they're looking for in the job role. Yes, I get it. This might seem obvious, but you might need to connect the dots for them. Show them exactly why you are the best fit for the job. I have said this many times. Be prepared and practice your answers. Believe me, it does make a difference. I do it too. And finally, have faith in yourself. You've worked through the UX questions and determine your personal relevant answers to these tough interview questions. You structured your stories using the STAR format and kept them tight and concise. You know your UX process and you feel comfortable sharing it with others. You formulated and practiced your elevator pitch. And then finally, you've practiced the heck out of it and you told yourself to suppress that ugly imposter syndrome. You are ready. You've got this. So go out and get that next UX job. Thank you, everybody, for hanging on. Does anybody have any questions? I'm going to have Lori direct some of the questions to us.
Yes, we have so many good questions, Jen. Here's one from Marcella. I've gotten slammed for not elaborating enough in answers, as well as not being succinct enough. Is there a way to gauge how long is enough, or is it totally random based on people's preference?
Well, Marcella, unless you have the skill of being a mind reader, I really can't tell you. It's more of a randomness. It's really difficult to gauge how much a person is looking for when you just met that person for a few minutes, when you don't know a lot. If you have the opportunity to talk to other people in the company or other people who know who's interviewing you, maybe ahead of time you can get some feels for what that person is like, but it is going to be really difficult to gauge just how much a person wants. I'm the kind of person who doesn't want to read a lot. I want to see your portfolio with bullet points. I don't want paragraphs. I don't want long stories. I want things quick and concise. And to me, that says a lot that you can do that. So it is a very difficult balance. And that's why, Marcella, I suggest that you practice it and refine it. And I do that with everything I do. My reports, my talks, I'm cutting, I'm adding, I'm cutting, adding, constantly refining to the best that you can to get the story down to the right amount of context. I know that's not a great answer. I wish I could tell you person A needs this and person B does that, but I can't.
Yeah. There's another question from Nora about speaking around when you're talking with a recruiter. Is it going too far to talk about a case study when you're at talking with the recruiter at that stage?
I don't think so. Most of the time recruiters won't ask. They do ask to see a case study just to see that you've done it. It depends on the conversation. If they want to walk through it with you, bring it out and let's talk about it. But they may not, because again, recruiters may not have the level of knowledge about the UX process or the position to really gauge whether you are good at it or not. So it depends on the recruiter and their depth of knowledge about UX. You could, if they're interested, and definitely always be prepared and have your computer with you, or, even if you want a printed copy of your, it depends, everybody has something different, but just gauge the conversation before, ask them, would you like me to walk through a case study with you? They say no, there's your answer.
There you go. What if, from T. Jampala, what about design? So what if you were in a design role previously, but now you're applying for a research role? Do you talk about that experience or not?
Absolutely. I have been both, and I have been either or. So like I mentioned, I come from a visual design background. So I was a designer. I have been a team of one where I had to be a UX researcher and designer. I have been an exclusive UX researcher, and I have been an exclusive designer. So in the role I am now, I'm both. So I think it is great that you can talk to your design skills. It shows, even if you aren't doing design, it shows that you have empathy for your designers, and you can communicate. I found that when I was on a team of researchers, as a researcher role, they valued my design skills because I could make their presentations better looking, and I could create deliverables that other researchers on the team didn't really have the skill sets to do, like good looking personas or journey maps. So they kind of relied on me to build those for the team. So there is nothing wrong with your design skills. They are definitely a valuable asset in the research world as well.
Excellent. From Karen, how do you establish empathy as part of your process if your company did not permit you to conduct user research?
Well, there's other ways that you can do research, and you don't necessarily have to get permission to do user research. You've heard the phrase, what is it? Ask for forgiveness later. What is it? I can't remember exactly what the phrase is, but do research anyways. And to be honest, I don't know how you can say that you have empathy if you haven't really done the research and seen the problems. I mean, you can't make empathy up. Empathy is something that you have within you, and it's something that you show and gain more insight to when you talk to your users. So you, like I mentioned, you could talk to, if you didn't get to do part of that as part of your process, you would speak to that. I wanted to do research, I didn't have the opportunity to do so. And can you talk to SMEs to get some of that insight about your users if you don't have the chance to talk to your users directly? Sometimes it's difficult. But talk to phone reps that hear from complaint calls. Hear what they're hearing about the complaints that people are calling in, or the troubles that they're calling in for. That will give you some insight on what the problems are too.
All right, another one from David. What about the time you don't know if your research made a difference because you don't know if anything was implemented after you presented your findings?
Yeah, David, I've been there. I've been there where I've done my research, and I've been in a consultancy role where I make recommendations, but I'm not part of the team that actually implements them or not. So you speak to that. You can follow up and ask them, and if it's a design that's public, you can see what design choices they made. Hopefully you have some friendly terms still with people who were on the team, and you can talk to them. Hey, how did that go? What changes were made and what's not? And a lot of times it's not necessarily your fault or something that you did wrong that changes are not made. Sometimes they don't value research and don't think that what you found out really makes a difference. They're going to find out later that it probably does. Or they don't have the time or the budget. Sometimes user research is just checking a box, and they really don't have any intention to implement the changes that you're going to find. And that's just part of the reality and part of a low UX maturity of some organizations. So, David, back to your question, there's different avenues that you could find out if it wasn't implemented. Like I said, talk to people on the team or whatnot. And don't take it too personally if they don't. I've been there. I've been there where, like, I've been working on a project and I've had to shift to another one. And they didn't implement what I said. And yeah, it stung, but we don't know what's going on behind the scenes that could be preventing some of those changes. So just keep that in mind, that you may not know the motivations behind that. It's probably not you. There's probably more likely bigger picture things going on politically, business wise, time wise, budget, that don't don't provide the opportunity to make the right changes like you suggested.
All right, we have another one from Michael. How do you answer a question that you might not have experienced, so you don't have an answer for it yet? So his example is like, have you had a situation where a stakeholder had a different design approach or didn't buy into your design? What did you do? But what if you just started your career and you haven't experienced that yet? How would you answer that?
Sure, that's a good question. I would be truthful about that. Don't tell them that you have, because they're gonna suss you out. They're gonna know. So don't lie. Um, Say, be honest. I haven't had the opportunity to do that, but if put in this situation, here's what I would do, and tell them what you would do. Be honest and tell them what you would do. Don't say that you did it, but put in the scenario. There's lots of scenarios that we've all been in that, or that we have not been in, that we may get asked about, and we just haven't experienced it yet. So be honest and say what you would do instead of what you actually did.
All right, got another question from Nora. Her previous company went bankrupt. That's why she's looking for a new job. And she's not really sure how to handle that. When they ask her about her previous position and they come up with the inevitable question of, why aren't you working there anymore?
Yep. To be truthful. It's not your fault they went bankrupt. They probably didn't listen to user research, and that's why they went bankrupt. No, just kidding, just kidding. Yeah, I've been in situations where you, you know, especially on a project where you just, hey, it just stopped. We just moved forward and we didn't finish it, and sure, you'd like to have finished it, but you didn't have the opportunity to do so. Be honest. Say things like, yeah, the company went bankrupt and that's why I'm here today, but let me tell you about some of the things I accomplished while I was there. Like, always try to find a way that you can shine and show your value, and flip the conversation to talking about, yeah, I might not be at that company anymore, but what I did there that is similar to what you're asking me to do here is A, B, C, D.
I like that answer. Okay, from Deborah, how do you deal with an interview that you know almost immediately that the job's not for you? She says, I wouldn't want to sell myself anymore, but how do you still remain kind of like an interested party, but not just shutting down that interviewer in the interview?
Yep, that's a fair question. That's a good one. Go through it. Go through the motions. And I'll tell you 2 reasons why. First one is, one thing I always encourage people to do is always go on an interview. Even if you're not 100% sure that you want to take that job, you're just not feeling it. Go on that interview anyways, because it's practice. There's new questions that come up in that interview that you may not have thought about, and you're like, oof, that was a tough question. I think I should have thought about that one better. I'm going to jot that down and come up with a better answer for that next time. Every single interview is a way to practice and to get better. So seriously, I have gone on some interviews. I was like, nope, I don't want to work here. Or you get in, you're like, oh yeah, this is not. Just go through the motions, be polite, act like you're still interested, and be very pleasant about it. Don't just shoot it down. And another reason, you don't know what kind of connection or impression that you might make. So here's an example. When I first moved to Los Angeles, I interviewed at a newspaper called Variety, and it's kind of like Hollywood's entertainment industry newspaper that all the movie studios read. I interviewed for a job there and I did not get the job. So I went and got a job somewhere else. Then 6 months later, Variety called me again and said, yeah, excuse me. They said, we're interested in calling you back again. They had another position open up. They never advertised it. What happened was I had made a pretty good impression in that first interview. They're like, you know, she's not a good fit for this role, but she's a good fit for this other role that's coming up. And so they called me in, I interviewed, and I took that job. So I have even here, I'll tell you another story. Even here, I interviewed here in my local town for a major telecom company, and I declined the job. I ended up going with another job because the other job was full-time and this telecom company was contract. And I met somebody on that interview who interviewed me who was really cool. I really liked her. She was a fellow researcher, and we have been friends ever since. This was like 3 years ago. We've been good friends. We look out for each other. We let each other know about research opportunities in town. So every interview is a chance to practice, make a good impression, and make a fantastic connection. And I'm speaking truth here because I have been benefited exclusively from interviews for that very reason. So I know I'm just kind of a long answer. The short answer is just endure it, write it out, take it to the end, and you can say no later. But now you know.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yes. All right. So some of these are things we always wonder about. So you're in the interview, you've gotten done with that particular interview, and you're going to ask, what are the next steps? And then their answer is always, well, we have 1 to 2 more weeks left of interviews. What do you say to that?
Good question. And it's probably very true. I have been in interviews where I didn't hear back for a month later. Things happen, things come up where there's a delay. Think about how the COVID virus has affected everybody, and suddenly we were in the office one day and the next day we're all out of the office, and it just throws everything for a loop. So keep in mind that it can take a while and it can take longer than they say, but don't be afraid to hit them up for information and just send them an email. If it's the recruiter, if that's the avenue that you've started, that's okay. Reach out to them and say, hey, I'm just checking in, wanted to see how things are going, what's the progress, and just want to progress, what's going on. It's okay to say that and to check in and to, just touch base. Just understand that just keep politely in, maybe every 1 week, 2 weeks, understanding that they got a lot going on too. I know this job interview is your number one priority, but it's not theirs likely. So just be empathetic to that too, that they got a lot going on and it can take some time.
So true. And so the last question for today, and I know you guys have at least 15 to 20 more questions, is around the salary range. So that recruiter is always going to ask you, what is your desired salary for this position? Mm-hmm. How do you handle that?
Don't you hate this question? I hate this question. And I just want to say really quickly, if you feel like there are a lot of questions that we did not answer, we might have to do a follow-up. We might have to do a follow-up Q&A kind of thing. So if you're interested in having some sort of follow-up, be it a webinar or some of those questions in a later session, let us know in the chat. Let us know if you're interested, and let us know if you have any additional questions. I know we're really tight on time, and I apologize that I can't get to all of them, and I'm sure there's some good ones. So get your last minute questions in there now, and I'm going to answer this question, which is about salary, which is a crappy question, and we certainly do hate hearing this, but we can't just sit there, and not answer and pretend like we didn't hear it. So what I would say is, well, turn it. Certainly you have a range in mind. Always don't tell them, first of all, have an idea of what the salary range for your position is in your market. Just kind of know, not what you're making. Obviously you're going to know what you're making, but know what the salary range is for that position, that level of experience. There's lots of, Glassdoor, there's lots of resources for you to find that, just so you have a number in mind. Talk to your friends, find out what they're making. These conversations should be okay to have with your friends. You should trust each other enough to educate each other. So find out what your friends are making. Don't, put everybody's cards out on the table. Know what the market value is. Then say, I know you probably have a range for this, so please, please share that with me. I would love to know a very broad ballpark range of what the salary range is. And they may not tell you. And you can say, well, since this is not early days, but since we're early in the process, I think I would have to know a bit more just beyond the job description about what this role really entails before I'm able to pinpoint a salary range around what this position should be. So I really need to be better educated, and hopefully that could come through my conversations with the hiring manager or the team to really understand what's going to be asked of me and what this role really entails. So the bottom line is, do not give a number. What you make now is absolutely none of their business, and they cannot find this out, from what I've been told. Don't 100% mark me on that, but from what I've understood in, say, background checks and whatnot, I don't think that they can find out what your salary range is. So what you make now has absolutely nothing to do with the salary that you would like to have or what this next position offers. So do not tell them your salary. If they ask you for a number, you say that you are within market, fair market value, and you think that's fair enough to share at this point. I know, cagey answer, but that's kind of what I would say. Anyway, thank you very much for your questions.